Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome back to Founders Week YQG. This event is all about bringing together entrepreneurs, startup innovators, change makers, entrepreneurial support organizations, local leaders, and community. We are very excited to have you on board for this inaugural Founders Week YQG. While this event is virtual, we would like to respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. We are grateful to work, learn, and live in this area. Also, this week would not have been made possible without our generous sponsors. I would like to thank the Province of Ontario, the St. Clair College Alumni Association, the Job Shop, Libro Credit Union, Workforce WindsorEssex, Baker Tilly Windsor LLP, Alpha Core Group, Venturit, EPICentre, Small Business Center, Genesis Entrepreneurship Center, and WEtech Alliance. Thank you for putting #Founders First. Today's session is hosted by WEtech Alliance. WEtech Alliance is one of 17 regional innovation centers funded by the province of Ontario, serving the Windsor-Essex and Chatham-Kent regions. We provide entrepreneurs with business services, training, mentorship, and strategic connections to help bring new ideas to market, scale to the next level, and build a dynamic culture and a community of innovation. The WEtech mission is to help start and grow tech and tech-enabled companies and champion innovation in the Windsor-Essex and Chatham-Kent region. To learn more about what we do and how we can help, please register for the Leveraging the Windsor-Essex Ecosystem Entrepreneurship Support Ecosystem Workshop on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Now, just on to a couple housekeeping items. We are leveraging Zoom webinar today, so you might not be able to see all the attendees that are in this session. However, you are able to engage with our speakers today through the chat box and through the Q&A section located at the bottom of your page. I understand we would all like to be in person and having this workshop here at the EPICentre, but due to restrictions and due to very valid cybersecurity concerns, we have gone with Zoom webinar today. This session will be recorded and a video, audio file, and relevant links will be made available to you on WEtech's YouTube channel post the event and in an attendee follow-up email. Additionally, we are streaming live on WEtech's Facebook page in case you run into any technical issues. And finally, let's make sure everyone knows Founders Week YQG is where it's at. So be sure to share your social media posts with the #Founders Week YQG on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, and use the custom GIFs that we have created. To look them up, please use the search term WEtech Alliance. Now I would like to welcome our speakers today, Noah Campbell and Kevin Gervais. As a recent graduate of U Windsor, Noah holds an honors bachelor's degree in applied computing with distinction. He also founded WinHacks, the region's first ever post-secondary hackathon, and Border Hacks, a cross-border hackathon funded by the US State Department. Noah also founded the first of 25 Google Developer Student Club chapters in North America at the University of Windsor. Beyond this, Noah has also held several positions within BlackBerry, writing training content used by 16 out of 20 G20 governments and a variety of public and private organizations, while championing many initiatives locally, such as the BlackBerry Bootcamp program. As a former tech community program manager of WEtech Alliance and in West Windsor-Essex, Noah catalyzed digital transformation on our main streets by leveraging over 1 million in support directly to small businesses. In March, Noah joined Wave Direct Telecommunications to lead government relations and strategic projects, where he secured over 21 million in government funding for local connectivity projects. Extending from this opportunity, Noah has recently joined Touchless as Director of Government and Community Innovation to create more accessible, connected, and data-driven communities right here in our region and beyond. Welcome, Noah.
Thanks for having me.
As for our second speaker here today, Kevin Gervais is a Windsor-born serial entrepreneur who has helped launch products and brands for 70 startups and 150 established companies spanning wellness, retail, construction, B2B, e-commerce, and Fortune 1000 clients through various agency work. From 2012 to 2018, Kevin served as founder and CEO of StatFlow to enable compliant one-to-one relationships between retailers and customers. Since 2015, StatFlow has scaled from a team of 2 to 80 plus, surpassed 10 million ARR, raised 25 million, hired a CEO in January 2019, and oversaw back-to-back years of 100% ARR growth. Today, as founder and CTO of Touchless, Kevin works to build a more accessible and connected world for people on the autism spectrum with inclusive and informed data and web experiences. Simultaneously, Kevin serves as the founder and CTO of AutoGenius, a dynamic organization focused on helping members push the boundaries of what's possible in automotive. Outside of Kevin's day jobs, you'll find him speaking on topics such as packaging, branding, mental health issues for startup founders, launching inexplicably fast websites, and dealing with ADHD and compliant messaging. Thank you for being here today, Kevin. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Now I will hand over the stage access to you and let you lead your workshop. Thank you for being here today.
Fantastic.
Nice to be here. I'm actually physically here, even though I moved away for a bit, but glad to be in the area and actively working in the community. So let's get rolling. So yeah, just to give you a quick rundown of what we do. Started Touchless to have a mission of making more accessible communities for people in the autism spectrum. I'll explain why in the next slide, but if you want to hear the story, you can search up Capital Geek. There's been a couple interviews I've had with them, but they recently did a podcast with me, which is a group out of Austin, on our story and what we're up to. And there's also a recent webinar from RudderStack. If you search for RudderStack, RudderStack space Kevin Gervais, or RudderStack Wave Direct, you'll see this about an hour-long webinar on how we use data design to do some really cool stuff. So feel free to listen to those things if you want to learn more about some of the stuff we've been up to. But just to talk about the story, so I think after starting a number of different companies, I think what I've found over the years is you always want to start with a strong why. Like my last company at StatFlow, what made it really work well is I hated being called from a call center by a wireless carrier. I was just so frustrated with service, dealing with carriers, that felt like a fun project to fix. And so lately, Touchless is about my younger brother is shown here. I'm on the left and he's on the right. And he's someone on the autism spectrum, recently diagnosed. And having him live with me taught me a lot the last few years since stepping back from CEO at StatFlow. And what it's taught is that seeing how he interfaces with technology, it's clear that the way that we build things today online is really frustrating. And it's almost like closing doors in front of people all the time. So not only is it frustrating for people on the spectrum, but it's frustrating for everybody else. Maybe we all just don't say it. But at least with autism, there's like physical pain that's felt if something's frustrating. And so if you can build things for people who are on the spectrum, it's kind of like what you see here on the right. where, we all benefit today pressing buttons or waving in front of a touchless sensor to open a door for us, even though those were not built for those who can walk and maybe those who don't physically need it. It's meant for people with a disability. But those things made for people who have a different circumstance than us, we all benefit from those things. And so touchless, our thesis around this is if you can design web technology or interfaces in the very same way, everyone else can benefit. And so that's just why we exist, and bring basically the touchless digital experience to everyone else in the same way that physical things have been helpful to people. Now, one thing that was interesting that I'll just talk about briefly is around some of these recent changes in Google. So Google in August, and they've given people years to get ready, they launched a change to their algorithm called Core Vitals. And it made it really, really important to have an accessible site and have a fast site. And what you're seeing here on the, it looks small, but if you were to set up Google Search Console for your business, you'll see that there's a section there very prominently that talks about your core vital scores or your page experience scores. And red is bad, yellow means work, green is good. And what we saw with a recent project is that even though the site felt fast to someone using it on a fast internet connection, for the most part, people are accessing the web through slower devices, right? Through a mobile phone, maybe as they walk around. And so that speed is different than what you get out of your desktop computer. And Google knows this. And so they really, really care right now, more than ever, as of August this year, speed and accessibility. And if you can fix those things, you actually get better ranking. And so this is the launch of a new experience we did with WaveDirect. And you'll see kind of in that middle, right? But the previous site felt pretty fast, but by fixing it with some newer technology, you see how the new thing on the right is, it's all good, right? You get green scores for page speed. And then we can show the effect that had overall once we made that change. And I think previous to this Google change, people would look at speed and accessibility and think of these as nice to have, or maybe not even related to each other. But for people who are on the autism spectrum, just like anyone else, I think right now too, really care about, if I touch something, I expect it to do something, right? Mobile apps have taught us that if I touch a control, if I touch a button, I expect to see some visual difference in what I just touched. And so we expect that from everything now. And again, this is why Google cares about this, because they want good page experiences to be ranked. So how do you do that? Well, the data flow really matters. Now this, might look scary. And I understand that, especially if you're a younger company. Thinking about data flows doesn't sound terribly exciting. But in the end, as your business scales, you'll actually find that everything is all about data. Like you get going and then you launch the site, and then you're always wondering later, how's it going? You're trying to track various metrics. Maybe you want things to end up in a content management system or a contact system like Salesforce. Maybe you want things to end up in certain places. So in the end, a business ends up being very much purely about data flows. So if you think about a little bit of it now, right, in the early stages, you can future-proof yourself. And so where this came from is, my last 8 years prior was working with telecom providers. So I spent, time working with each of the main ones that we know, and learning how they move data around and how do they try and keep track of millions of records. And you just see at scale, it's all about data. And if you can fix that flow initially in the beginning, you can enable some cool things. But also outside of the future proofing, what we found is that if you can have the right technology stack, you can enable that faster web experience that I showed in the previous slide. And so that's something that we've made at Touchless, which is something called the Touchless Exo layer, a very simple kind of front end that can adapt and be future-proof and make it so you're not kind of starting projects from scratch all the time or relying on a developer to kind of write all the right code the first time too, because it can waste a lot of money. And it also makes your dollars go further. So this is part of what we do. And what came out of all that, so we know that Google made this change. We know that data flows were kind of really, they kind of mattered. But it's more about what you do with those things, right? So this was, again, a recent project where we went in, realized that there were some data things to solve, but in doing so, we ended up showing what does that mean, right? And you can actually make a really accessible web experience that makes things go from 4 or 5 steps to do something to being 1 step or 2 steps. And again, if you design for autism, what we found is it created a really good result for everyone else. And you'll see if you get a chance to listen to the webinar that was mentioned earlier from RudderStack, you'll see that it resulted in a 4x increase in leads, which was incredible to see in just a very short amount of time. And why was that the case? Well, if you can fix the speed and you make a really good flow, Google notices, right? They notice the experience of the site is better than normal. And so if you see on the right here, I know it's dark, but the first 1, 2, 3, 4 things listed there are all paid competitors, right? These are competitors paying for those spots. And WaveDirect is the first result underneath the ads for organic. And what the result of that, of being able to get ranked in an organic way, saves, in this case, some of these keywords that it ranks really well in, over $10,000 a month is saved that you would otherwise have to spend to be in that top position in Google. And you can see the effect since launching the new experience that we did. It started out being on the 20th page on some of these keywords and ended up being in position 1 or 2 or 3 on so many of them. And so it took about a couple months to really see the full effect, about 60 days. Sometimes it can take longer, but this was surprising to see that if you solve for accessibility and speed, Google notices, and you get basically this free marketing that can come of it. And this is also from Google's control panel. When they score a site, you'll see this under a section called site experience or page experience score. And you can see the effect of what happened when we launched the new experience. So technically the new site launched right as you see the things dip off in July 10th is when the new site launched. And then Google kind of goes through a period where they're like, what just happened? Everything disappeared. And that's why there's this like chasm, this like empty space. And then they're like, oh, they figure it out about a month later. Oh, wow, okay. We've run the average over the last 30 days. This is something really cool. And then bam, we can see the effect that it had, in getting this top rank. So they generally look at these things over a period of time. And that's just, these are some learnings about this new thing they've created called the core vital scores and the page experience score, where they look at an average over a 28-day period. And that explains why when we made the change to the site and we got rid of a whole bunch of pages, you can see it just went to 0. But that's time for Google to figure out, what is this thing? What's the average experience? And then once it jumped up to the 98%, good, that's where we started to really see the improvement in ranking. And this is the raw results. So just being able to see, a huge increase on some specific, keywords, monthly, address lookups, monthly leads, and being able to see different results around, improvement, almost, I wouldn't say overnight, but it was within 45 to 60 days of launching the site, which I would consider, after launching hundreds of sites over the years, I would consider this extremely fast to see this result. Normally, this would take years to do. And again, just optimizing for speed and accessibility, it jumped Wave Direct over very large competitors that we can't name, but you can probably predict who they are, into the top position. And so many keywords, over 150 keywords. It's now number 10, or in the top 10, and especially for local searches. So that was, yeah, very surprising to see that if you can focus on, the people who, think differently or have a very short attention span, and if you can think about speed, if you can think about usability and the data flow to enable that type of thing, you get some free marketing out of it as a result, and you become more efficient. So normally, just fixing it on its own, you'd feel good about it, right? You'd be like, "Oh, great, I've made some people's lives better." But turns out, if you do it, you get some good business results from it too.
Hmm. Fantastic. And I know, Kevin, like it's what's interesting to me when seeing this. I mean, I have a degree in computer science, and when you first explained some of this to me, it went right over my head. So it takes a little bit of time to get used to. But what's interesting is like how simple it actually is, right? You're really just optimizing for speed and you're optimizing for accessibility. Some folks think on a website it needs to be the flashiest, most thing in the world with a video and these lots and lots of high quality pictures. And, while high quality content is important, really with how Google is evaluating you now, it really comes down to that speed and accessibility
Mhm. Well, and
beyond.
on that point, like I think a lot of people, just working with different founders over the years, and I do a bunch of work with Techstars and different advisory groups, and one thing I've noticed is that the typical path, right, as a business owner, will go and work with a graphic designer,
Mm,
and I'll lay it out. And while that's helpful, I think to a lot of business owners to visualize something, there is a difference between graphic design and user experience design. It's a different skill set. User experience design, you get really deep into the psychology of what is the intent, that someone is expecting compared to all the other apps that they're looking at. So the graphic design can kind of help create like a layout of maybe where the building blocks might be, but trying to think about UX, which is, what's that user experience? How logical is this? One quick thing to say, what's the difference between a site that's made for autism or not? With autism, you have to be very, very direct. You have to be wave direct. No, but you have to. Sorry, I had to use that. No, but you have to be so clear. Like you can't just say like learn more, or like if you're trying to get them to apply to a loan, as an example, or to sign up for a certain service, don't have links that are very generic that say, you know, go next or go here, or you'd state what you're about, where they're about to go. Make it very clear so that they are opting in to the next experience. And while you might get less clicks when you do that, you're not making it frustrating for people who go to your page that maybe felt tricked,
mm.
and then they leave and then never come back ever again. It's better to be clear about what you're trying to present to someone and take that time to write in a very clear way, as opposed to just focusing on the colors and where things look at it. Just, yeah, taking that pause will add the humanity back and the empathy back, I think, into business that often goes unnoticed.
For sure. And I mean, before I get into our next segment here, I want to do a quick note on search engine optimization because we know a lot of founders are worried about SEO and figuring out how all that works so they can rank at the top in Google, and they're paying agencies sometimes thousands of dollars a month to optimize their SEO, and many of them don't even necessarily know what that means, and it becomes very frustrating. What are your thoughts on SEO in the age of this new Google algorithm before I get into this next segment?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who ran agencies and did charge people for SEO, I look at some of this and I go, wow, this is a completely different change. This is a huge change, I think, to that industry where if you work with typical SEO agencies, probably your first question, if you were to interview someone who says that they know SEO, is you start asking them about what's their experience working with Core Vitals and the
Yeah.
new Google algorithm and page experience score. If they look at you in a blank way, and run.
Yeah.
Because the reality is Google is very clear about what it takes to optimize a site. It's not about stuffing it with keywords. It's
Yeah.
not about trying to game the system. Those that do, they end up getting pushed out of the results permanently within a few months, just by the algorithm. So, or if they get away with it for a bit, just know that it can go away at any time. So, like a better way, right? If you're thinking about SEO, is just make fast experiences that are so much easier and more clear than anyone else.
Mhm.
And you'd be surprised, how much that can work. What we also found with WaveDirect is you might look at their site, right? You might go to wavedirect.net and go, wow, this is really simple. What's so special about this? Now, if you want the technical details, you can listen to the RegStack chat. But the reality is that site is over 100 pages. But there's a bunch of ones that are very localized, and those are the ones that get ranked, right? It's not like the homepage is going to get ranked for all kinds of keywords. The focus is instead making personalized content for the different types of keywords you're going after. So I think, yeah, I think if you're thinking about SEO, I think what I would recommend is just kind of consider it's more about a content strategy and a quality strategy and a accessibility strategy and a speed strategy than trying to come up with keywords that you have to get put in somewhere or just going after paid backlinks and a bunch of other stuff. Like this was very surprising to see the impact it had on SEO compared to the typical tactics that folks use. And I guess just the other thing that is just on the cost is this just takes your energy as an entrepreneur or your team. If you can slow the process down a little bit to kind of design the right content, you could save yourself thousands and thousands of dollars a month, because this stuff is really free, actually, if you take the time to think through some of these things.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And I mean, for folks who aren't Kevin Gervais and spend their days pondering how to make really fast websites and make them very accessible and fantastic and want to kind of offload that to somebody else because you're a busy entrepreneur trying to run your business and build your business, there are programs available and they're still out and still around and literally, desperately seeking out applicants to apply for funding. So many of that, and you may have heard of some of them. You may be cautious of some of them because you've perhaps heard, there might be difficulty in filling out the application, or if you just are unfamiliar with, pursuing funding applications, it may be intimidating. But I'm really here to tell you these two programs in particular, offered by Digital Main Street, are two fantastic programs that can kind of set you up for success. The one, my personal favorite is the DMS Ontario Grant Program. All these are available at digitalmainstreet.ca as well, folks. And give it a quick Google. Their site's pretty good, so you'll get there pretty quickly by searching for it. But the one on the left, the DMS Ontario Grant. So this is providing brick and mortar small businesses with $2,500 digital transformation grants. And really, what's important here, you fill out a very quick application. You sit through about 2 hours worth of training videos that are free training videos by experts in the field, explaining how to put your business online and some of the best practices. And then you build the digital transformation plan. So you do a little bit of thinking to apply some of this, and really see what you can do to put together a digital transformation plan that outlines your goals for what you're attempting to accomplish with growing your business and putting it online. and outline exactly what you are hoping to accomplish. You then submit this digital transformation plan, and hopefully, if everything goes well, you get $2,500 to implement it. So if you're focused on trying to get a website together, if you're focused on trying to revise your original website, this is a great way to get funding to do that. And it's important for you to be able to then take that funding and find a vendor, if you're not interested in doing it yourself, who understands the importance of speed and accessibility as of the new age of websites that we're seeing now with this new Google algorithm. So that's something to consider. The applications right now are open until the end of November. Originally, they were open till the end of October, but there was still funding available, so they extended it to the end of November. And on November 1st, they had 1,000 spots available for businesses in Ontario. And now, so they'll keep that open until funds are depleted. So get an application in as soon as you can. It's going to take you about 3 hours from start to finish, and you make $2,500 an hour, or $2,500 for that 3 hours of work. Another strong program is the DMS Shop Here program. So this will actually pair you with some local vendors who will create a website for you in an easy and no-cost way, so you can get selling online right away. So if you are a kind of a brick and mortar small business, you don't yet have a website, and you want to try to sell products online but have no idea where to start, and funding is an issue, the Shop Here program is a great program for that. That is powered by our friends at Google as well as our friends at Digital Main Street. They work together to pair you with a vendor who can make this happen. And the biggest things if you're taking something away from this workshop, the biggest things to harp on whatever vendor you choose is the need for speed and accessibility, because that's what Google cares about now. If you spend zero time on search engine optimization, but you spend the focus of your time on speed and accessibility, you're fine. That's exactly what you need to be doing, so you don't fall into this web of SEO. And there's a variety of other grants, and we'll get into it a little bit. But I mean, money doesn't have to come directly in a way that is directly at your website, if that makes sense. You can find funding from other sources to free up more money to, redirect into your website. So two programs that I feel are underutilized are the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. So folks who are renting their business space can work with the government to receive some funding back on that, particularly if you were hard hit by COVID-19. If you were in a region that was locked down for a significant amount of time, like Leamington that we're in right now, or Kingsville, that was in a lockdown longer than other parts of the province, or the GTA that's been in lockdowns for longer than other parts of the province. Leveraging this funding is really important. These applications do seem complex, but if you have a good accountant, they can support you with that. If you have a good bookkeeper, they can support you with that. If you do not, or if you are, worried about running up the accountant's bill, the Canadian Public Service is here to help. The folks at the CRA, you may be intimidated, but they're actually really nice people. And if you sit with them, they will go through this application with you, explain how it works. There are some good tools on the Government of Canada website to help you, as well as the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to help you keep your employees on. And again, if you're subsidizing some of the costs and some of the missed revenues that you hit, you now have additional money available to help grow and move forward. As an entrepreneur, we're always looking to be building forward and building for the future. We're hearing now a lot about building back better. If you can leverage some funding to do that, you'll be able to grow your business while still keeping the, going beyond just keeping the lights on. You can go and build what you want to build. You can build an ultra-fast web experience that allows you to get more leads and ultimately sell more products or services. And I want to give an additional shout out to this tool that I've just been learning about through the team at WEtech Alliance. This tool is called Pocketed. So it helps, it like scans and collates and puts together a bunch of different grants offered across the country, both provincial grants, federal grants, municipal grants, ones offered by nonprofit institutions. It's a fantastic tool. It puts all this together for you. It gives you kind of a brief of the grant, what's going on with it, some of the eligibility requirements, the application requirements, how difficult is it, what's the money that you can get out of it, and you can actually apply, through their portal to the grant. And that's what's so fantastic. I've written many grants, and they can be tough, especially if you're an entrepreneur who's short on time, doesn't necessarily know where to start. I've really been recommending this Pocketed tool for folks to know where to start, because you can search for these grants, you can apply directly, And eventually, if you needed to, you could hire a grant writer directly through the Pocketed tool to help build up what you're looking for. WEtech Alliance is partnered with Pocketed. We have to give a shout out to our friends at WEtech Alliance for hosting not only this session, but all of Founders Week and everything exciting happening there. And they're also partners with the team at Pocketed. So there's a code that they have there for you when you go to create the account that you can leverage. And their Pocketed is a startup, just like, and so it's being built by founders right now. They just raised $1 million in some seed funding to help grow their business. So they are invested in growing this tool, and it's a fantastic tool for folks looking for ways to, get this money so they can, again, build their business, build back better, build that website, build that super fast web experience, and leverage more leads. So that's what we've got for you today, folks. So we've got our contact information on the screen here. If you want to reach out, best to email me instead of Kevin. I'm a little faster on the email, but we love him. He is actually much faster on the LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, he's pretty quick on that, but I'm faster on email. So if you're an email kind of person, holler at me. And we'd be happy to chat with you, help you navigate digital Main Street, help you navigate your, building your fast and accessible web experience. But with that, I'm going to pass it back to the WEtech Alliance team for any questions that folks may have in the Q&A feature or in closing remarks. So shout out to all of you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Noah, and thank you, Kevin. All of the links and all of the website that you mentioned during the session, we are looking to put it together in a Founders Week YQG, essentially a toolkit, and give that back to our team members and our audience today. Now, if you have any questions for Kevin and Noah, please input them in the Q&A chat box, and I'll happily hand them over to you.
Just catching up on some of the comments as well, folks. Thanks
Yeah.
thanks for the shout outs.
Thank you.
Very nice. And I have to give a shout out as well to Sue Taylor at the St. Clair Genesis Center. She's been texting me while we've been on this. So a big shout out to you, Sue Taylor, and all the work that you're doing to support entrepreneurs. So I have to give a shout out. But anyways.
Yeah, she's also helped with significant planning for Founders Week YQG.
Fantastic. Oh, and I see a question pop up. Oh, a shout out from Joanne. We love Joanne. Big shout out to Joanne at WaveDirect and the team at WaveDirect for letting us continue to, use their business as a case study for so many others that we explain. They have been such a fantastic, example of what happens when you invest in building a strong, fast, and accessible website. And I see a question here from an attendee, and this is a good one for you, Kevin. If you had $5,000 to spend in digital transformation, where would you spend it?
I mean, there's a lot of answers to that. It depends on where you're at, what stage you're at, right? So if you're looking to spend it on digital transformation, I guess the assumption is that you already exist, right, as a business, and that what generally seems to work is you need to figure out where your baseline is. So in order to know what to work on, you have to know where you are. So if you don't know where you are, I'd start there. So if you do know where you are, like if you have all of the metrics and stuff, you have a command over your main numbers and like what's important and what's your retention rate and what's your acquisition rate and what's your growth rate and what's your acquisition cost, et cetera, et cetera. If you have command over that, the financials of the business probably dictate where you should go, right? There's probably parts that aren't growing as fast, or maybe there's parts that are slowing you down, or maybe it's you're spending too much on one thing, right? Because in the end, a business is there to make profit for its shareholders, right? So digital transformation should make it easier to do that, right? So it should reduce friction in the business. And it doesn't mean that you have to do a lot of stuff. Like in the WaveDirect case, we started with the question, where are you, Like, where are we at? And when we couldn't answer that question, then the work was, well, let's do a project to clean the data to get an understanding of the current baseline. Then once we had that, then that dictated, okay, oh, we probably should work on some of the web experience. And then once we figure that out, like, you kind of can break it into chunks, but just if you already had the, the stats and you already knew where you were, then that's not something you need to transform. But if you don't, I'd start there, right? And sometimes those are pretty simple projects. And I would make sure, I don't think you necessarily have to spend all 5K on that part, depending on how complicated it's at. But I definitely would start with making sure that you have a baseline. And yeah, lots of questions. Hopefully, if it's the same person, great. This is fantastic.
I don't think it's the same person. I think there's
But
multiple.
if it's all anonymous, okay, it's like we just see anonymous. Anonymous says, yeah. Next question we got was, what technologies do you foresee playing an important role in the future? In other words, what are the big technologies coming down the pipeline? I mean, we don't have an hour, but I could. I would say, there's a couple big buckets coming right now. I think data is moving to a place where you track it in real time, and which means you're not waiting for a report every hour or every day. You're not manually crunching numbers. You're getting a real-time pulse of things. We know that this web thing, that this thing called the web, that's going through a major transformation right now. I would argue it's the biggest transformation in 20 years that's happening right now. And I don't think people have realized this yet. Look, but this Google change that just recently hit is going to affect everything. And only a small fraction, we're talking 2 to 3% of the world, of all the websites are actually passing core vitals, this update. So that's going to take a long time to get everybody, up to speed, literally. And it could take 10 years. It could take 5 years, right? So as much as like we get excited about the new cool technologies, like, I think we're going to want to start with, let's make it so people stay on our website more than 5 seconds before they leave and get frustrated. So, and then we can talk about the cool stuff, right? But I don't know if that answers that question, but those are just like two things around, data moving, constantly having data moving and going to where it needs to go and in a clean way. And this importance around speed and accessibility.
I really like the next question. How do you
want to read that
tackle
one?
leaders? How do you tackle leaders who don't understand technology and don't think it's a worthy investment? First, I corner them in a hall, and then I just go full force. That's how I tackle them. No, but how do we actually address that? How do we fix that? Or how do we make it so they understand the value in what's being proposed? Because I have a feeling this person is a employee who's been standing on a soapbox trying to make it clear. How can we help them?
I understand that challenge. I mean, it is, everyone struggles with this. I mean, I guess the best I could say is know that you're not alone, right? And again, one lesson from an entrepreneurship standpoint is that what's helped me stay somewhat, what's the word? In line, like not curling up in a corner and crying all the time, is that just starting with the assumption that someone has already solved this already, right? There are already people who've answered this question, and sometimes just finding community around people who are in a similar situation. They probably already exist online, right? Either in a Slack community or huddles somewhere. Like your peer group is the world. So you can really go to anyone like you in a similar role. There are clusters of people anywhere, and it doesn't matter if there's nothing stopping you from joining a huddle in Atlanta or in San Francisco, and yet still be a business here in Windsor, right? So you can listen in, you can find community of people who've asked those same questions. So that's kind of one thing you can think about, just to give it, so you realize you're not alone. But sometimes it's just creating small examples, right? Showing how a little bit of effort can bring more clarity. So if you do a lot more of that, maybe you'll have more impact. So don't going back maybe to thinking of the question that someone asked earlier about, if you had $5,000 to spend, where would you put it? Sometimes when you're trying to convince, people if it's a worthy investment, maybe you're trying to do too much at once.
Mhm.
Maybe, it's about creating a small win first to show that if we did a little bit of data cleanup, now we can get the answers we're looking for. Or if we did a little bit of this, web experience update, then we would get a better result. So again, you kind of pick something small as a suggestion, right? Just to be able to demonstrate it, and you also show the other people in the business that you are going to measure things based on its business impact. Because I think sometimes this is where, as someone who is a technology guy, what I've struggled with in the past, eventually I kind of learned it, but is, in your mind, it might be so clear, right? Oh, if you just do this and that, everything will work. But they speak a different language. And I think why things don't move along sometimes is because people are talking with different language, right? They need to hear things from their perspective, and you're talking from your perspective. So if you can somehow meet in the middle, that would be great. But to start with, I think a lot of technology people need to work on the communication side of
Yep.
things. To, I mean, Noah, as someone you can probably speak to this more as the translator sometimes. But like, would you agree with that
Oh yeah.
idea?
I mean, it's very easy to watch some of our best technical folks get into a room with another, leadership who is not necessarily as technically, inclined. And you can just sit in the room and watch the eyes glass over when they don't quite understand what's going on. So, I mean, a benchmark I try to use, I like the idea of those small little bits of, here's what we want to do, here's an example of why that works, rather than scaring them right up front. And then I take that a step further to go, can I explain this to my grandma and will it make sense to her? Right? Somebody
Mhm.
who struggles to turn on her new laptop, which we just got her set up with Windows 11, to check her email from those discounts from LL Bean so she can do the holiday shopping. Can she understand what I'm trying to go then explain to one of our larger customers later? Like, what is the goal of that? And if she can't do it, then we don't use it. So keeping it
And
really clear. Yeah.
and and then there's this. It kind of dovetails well to this next question that came in. Just
Yes.
like, how do you avoid falling back into the old habits instead of transforming forward?
Yeah.
Um, Here's what I noticed that most businesses struggle with. And it's not like, if this is you, if you noticed it, everyone struggles with this. Even companies you think have all their stuff together, even the ones that have raised tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, they all have this problem. Metrics
Mm.
and baselines and KPIs. They sound scary, but that is how you solve that problem, right? Also, kind of how you solve the problem above too, is where are you trying to go? If you don't know where you're going, then it's hard to convince anyone to change. But if someone knows, okay, I have this goal. I want to grow 12%. I want my churn to be X. You can then reverse engineer, right? If you want that, then that means you must do this, this, and that.
Yeah.
And then once that becomes the baseline, if they start to go into the old habits, they're not going to continue to achieve the good results, right? So a way to just protect against going back into the old routine is continually set a higher bar every week, right? It could just be an incremental change, right? Like, okay, this week we're going to make 10 widgets, and last week we made 8 or 9.5. I don't know. We had half of one we didn't finish. This week we're going to finish 10. It could start with that, right? And then if you keep doing that, if you were to just get a little bit better every week,
Mhm.
incrementally, it's hard for someone to go back to the old way, because the if they did, they wouldn't be able to achieve the new way, right? So when I hear this question, usually that it means that the business doesn't have KPIs, it doesn't have key indicators of success or clear targets. Or the targets are too low. Like instead they go, oh, let's actually make maybe they say I want to make one more widget a week when they could have been making 500 more a week.
Mm.
And Noah, since joining, sometimes we get into this dialogue because even though I've done a bunch of businesses and I've had some scar tissue from it. Every business starts from scratch, right? I start them all kind of the same way, right from the very beginning. Yeah, you pull from some experience, but they all have to get kind of started from the beginning. But one thing we've talked about is like, pace, right? The business is actually growing, much faster than we were expecting. And so, but that's also because the target I have is I want revenue to be up 10 times next year. And so that's in 1 year, right? And so, yeah, could we have created a target that says I want to grow 20%? Sure. But then we make different decisions, right? But sometimes it is possible to set higher targets and just force those changes, in those situations. So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully, gives you something to think about, right? In how do you help change behavior?
And I think for folks that are new to setting those kinds of goals, I got to give another plug back to the DMS, the Ontario grants, the Digital Main Street Ontario grants, because part of that application process is this it's comprehensive, but it doesn't take 100 years, but it is comprehensive. The digital transformation plan that forces you to think about what are my KPIs? That's one of the questions. What are the KPIs? How will I know that I've hit this thing? And what am I going to do to get there? If you're brand new to trying to set those, that's a great tool. Whether you get the money or not, or whether you do, or even whether you apply or not, I strongly encourage you to because there's money available. But whether or not you do, just doing the exercise is worth a lot of value, and repeating on that exercise.
And even maybe just to counter what I just said earlier, just to give you a counterpoint. This is also how my mind works. Here's the opinion, and here's 6 others. No, but another thing to think about, though, just as a bit of another consideration is sometimes the old way is okay, right? Maybe you don't need to change it. Maybe that's not the thing to change, right? If someone keeps going back into the old way and it still works, right? Maybe it's okay. So I think just understanding what's the harm, right? Like, so that's what goes back to measuring. Like if you have a colleague or, rest of the team says they just kind of continue to go the old way, what makes it bad? What outside of you getting irritated or knowing that there's maybe a different way to do it, what's the impact of the business that they are doing it the old way? Is it that they can only make 2 widgets a week? Or does it mean that it takes 25 hours to get back to someone who emails you? Like, what's the evidence of that? How does it impact parts of the business? And sometimes because when you do this exercise, you might find there's 100 things to work on, probably more, right? Everyone has tons of stuff to work on, lots of fire. Because like a thing, maybe here people will think maybe you've read this or heard this, but as a business owner, typically, you walk into a room with your employees or maybe with customers, and in your mind, everything's on fire. This is a common thought that my brother has done a bunch of stuff with me over the years. We always thought everything's on fire. Sometimes staff will be like, "This is on fire." No, everything's on fire. And maybe your fire is the smallest fire. And there's everything. So but I think just when you look at, something being done the old way, just being willing to pause and go, is that okay, right? Are there other fires that are more pressing? And maybe the answer is no, but maybe the answer is yes. So again, but going back to Noah's point about the grants, like sometimes going through that grant application is the way to force these conversations, right? And create some structure. So it's not just, a lone employee trying to affect change. You're kind of creating an organizational process that says, okay, let's apply to this. Let's answer the question and let's figure out how we measure things. Because you kind of have to go through that when you do the application process.
100%. I know Shreya's probably getting ready with her sheep hook here to pull us off the stage. So before we toss it back to her, Kevin, your top summary. What do you want people leaving right now to know and keep in mind before we pass it back to her? Keep it short, very short.
Think about people different than you.
Mm.
And empathy creates great business results, better than results without it.
Deal.
Deal. That's my message.
Good. I like it. Keep it simple, keep it fast, and keep it accessible. Fantastic. Then go get some money to go do all that. Shreya, back to you. The stage is yours. Thanks again for having us. Closing remarks on your end.
Thank you so much, Noah. And thank you, Kevin, for both sharing your insights and knowledge with us today. I have pasted a quick survey link for our attendees here today to get some feedback. This is essential for our ecosystem and our speakers to understand how we can improve our programming for you. And the fun part is this will enter you for a session giveaway to win a $50 Windsor card. So the more sessions you provide feedback for, the more entries you can have in the final draw. Now, before we exit the event, I just want to take a quick screenshot. So if everybody could just give me a great Founders Week smile, I will go ahead and take a quick shot. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think I made it work. If not, I will go back and screenshot again.
There you go.
And for our attendees today, please don't forget to check out the schedule for upcoming events. Next up, we have Founders Week YQG Open Networking at 6 p.m., followed by Trivia Night with Mac Flash Entertainment at 7 p.m. So please make sure you check out those 2 fun events we have planned. Additionally, we want to make sure you don't miss out Founders Week YQG Town Hall Wednesday at 6 p.m. and Failure Night on Friday at 6 p.m. Make sure you add them to your schedule so that our platform reminds you when those session links are available. Thank you everyone for attending today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
Enjoy your day.